Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are diving into a topic today that's pretty meta. One of our listeners actually sent us some excerpts from their book. It's a book of aphorisms about technology. But what's really interesting is they ran these kind of deep thoughts about tech through a Gemini AI browser extension and shared the AI summary with us.
So basically we have AI trying to wrap its head around a critique of itself and technology. Pretty fascinating stuff.
Right. So our goal today isn't just to explore what the listener has to say about technology and AI, but also to look at how well these AI summaries really work. A lot of us, including you, our listeners, want to grasp these big concepts quickly, but without sacrificing real understanding. Is AI the answer to that, or is it just giving us a more efficient way to oversimplify things?
I think it's a great question. And actually, the listener included a phrase in their book that captures this perfectly: different ways of skimming the cat. It suggests that AI might be offering yet another way to miss the point, even if it feels faster and more efficient.
They even gave an example where they used Gemini to summarize a video transcript, and the AI completely missed crucial nuances in the original message. Like, it completely changed the meaning. That really highlights the risk of just blindly trusting AI summaries, right?
Absolutely. It makes you question the whole idea of summarization. When you reduce these intricate arguments to a few bullet points, what inevitably gets left behind? And how does AI's interpretation further distort that process?
So let's jump into the AI's attempt to summarize our listener's book. Okay, the first point it makes is, technology's double-edged sword. Every new technology simultaneously enhances and diminishes human intelligence. It's something we hear a lot these days, this idea of technology as a trade-off.
It's a familiar narrative for sure, but what's interesting is the listener's response to that was, I didn't say that. And then the AI goes on to attribute the concept of laziness to entry number 2887, which the listener specifically points out isn't even in their book.
Wow, so a complete invention, a classic case of what people call an AI hallucination, the AI confidently making stuff up.
Exactly. It's making claims about the book's content that are just completely fabricated. And to make things even more interesting, the listener tells us what entry 28887 actually talks about, which is the balance between play, work, and creativity, they wrote. Play that has some level of work in it is probably better than all play. When work becomes all play, that's probably not an optimal creative state. Laziness or unseriousness comes into play, which is like a much deeper take on this whole issue than just saying, technology makes us lazy. What do you think might be going on there? Why would the AI go with that double-edged sword idea when that's not what the author actually said?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Why make that leap?
It might be picking up on patterns in its training data where that idea technology as a double-edged sword is a common theme. The AI, lacking genuine understanding, might just default to that familiar trope. It also highlights the limitations of AI when it comes to accurately reflecting the specific nuances of the source material.
It's like the AI sees the word technology, it sees the word intelligence, and it just fills in the blanks with this pre-programmed idea.
Right, exactly. And the hallucination about laziness really highlights the difference between AI's ability to recognize patterns in text and its ability to actually understand the meaning of that text. It's not really reading and comprehending, it's predicting and generating output based on massive amounts of data.
Okay, so moving on to the second point the AI makes.
Yeah.
It says, the internet's evolution, from utopia to Dust Bowl. Another sort of familiar story. The internet started with so much promise and now not so much. But our listener took issue specifically with the AI statement that social media can foster division.
Yeah, they said, I didn't say foster division anywhere. The actual quote from their book, from entry 1631, is about tribal division online. They wrote, it's so ironic that in today's online tribal divisions, we like to play on both sides of the wall, i.e. using the progress we've made to even construct the internet in the spirit of globalism in the first place, Facebook's idea of zeitgeist, and then entertain the idea to recede to our ancient past we thought we had transcended, which is a much more layered take on the issue.
Right. It's not just that the internet creates division, but that we're using this tool for connection to actually reinforce these much older tribal ways of relating to each other. It's a deeper point about human behavior in the digital age. Why do you think the AI missed that and went with the more kind of generic foster division idea?
It probably has to do with the AI's ability to understand irony or social commentary. AI often operates on this more surface level of language, so it can identify keywords like division, but might miss the bigger picture. The historical reference the listener makes, the inherent contradiction they're pointing out, it all goes over the AI's head.
So it's not just about the words themselves, but the way those words are being used, the context they're embedded in.
Right. And I think that's where AI really struggles. It oversimplifies complex arguments into more digestible but less accurate summaries.
Okay, so the third bullet point the AI gives us is about AI itself. AI, progress, or peril. It kind of summarizes some of the anxieties around AI misuse, ethical concerns, and even the possibility of human extinction. It also suggests critical thinking as a way forward, to which our listener responds with a very simple, yay.
Which, that short response speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It does. Like, yeah, you got the basics, but there's so much more to it.
Right, exactly. It's like the AI captures these broad anxieties about AI, but it doesn't come close to the depth and the nuance of what the listener is actually exploring in their book.
Okay, so now, our listener also shared a section from their book, which they titled Deep Dive. And they actually point out that even this excerpt contains inaccuracies, which is like another layer of meta on top of everything else. But within this excerpt, they have this really powerful aphorism, entry 2940. Like the nuclear arms race, AI is a race to the elimination of the human race. It's a pretty intense comparison.
Yeah, a very stark analogy, immediately bringing to mind that feeling of global anxiety and that very real fear of self-destruction. It really elevates the stakes of the conversation.
And then they add this parenthetical question, can the winners of the race to the future remain unscathed? Which, wow, adds another layer of complexity.
It really does. It makes you think about whether even the people who create and control AI will be immune to its consequences. It challenges the whole idea of there being a winner in this scenario.
And what's interesting is they attach a specific date to this entry, April 2024. And they include a link, even though it leads to a future date. It kind of grounds this whole thought experiment in a specific moment in time, highlighting how much this conversation about AI's impact is evolving.
It gives it a sense of urgency, like this isn't some distant future problem, it's happening now. And this actually ties into something else the listener included, a quote from Elon Musk from way back in May 2014. He warned about the dangers of AI, saying, if I were to guess what our biggest existential threat is, it's probably that. So we need to be very careful with the artificial intelligence. That was nearly 11 years ago.
Wow, so these concerns have been around for a while.
Definitely. It's not a new conversation.
Musk even compared developing AI to summoning the demon. He used the analogy of the guy with the pentagram and holy water, thinking he can control it and then realizing, nope, he can't. It's a very vivid image.
It is. And it definitely reflects that shared unease about the unpredictable nature of increasingly powerful AI.
But then the listener kind of brings us back down to earth with a more practical point. They talk about all the issues we have with our current technology, software updates, security updates, reindexing, system backups, virus checks, and system not responding errors.
Yeah.
If we could barely keep our existing systems running smoothly, how can we expect to flawlessly develop and control something as complex as advanced AI?
Right. It's a good reality check. We're so focused on these big future risks of AI that we forget how messy and imperfect technology is in general.
And they make the point that anything relying on text-based systems like dictionaries or code will inevitably have bugs. It's just a fundamental part of how software works, no matter how carefully you design it.
Exactly. There's always going to be some level of error.
And this leads to the listener's last point, which is about the difference between low context and high context communication. Drawing on the work of anthropologist Edward Hall, could you explain what those terms mean in relation to AI?
Of course. So in low context communication, information is mainly conveyed through explicit language, both spoken and written. Everything needs to be spelled out clearly. Yeah, there's very little left to interpretation.
Like writing a very detailed instruction manual.
Exactly. Whereas in high context communication, a lot of the meaning is implicit. It's conveyed through shared cultural understanding, historical context, unspoken cues, and established relationships.
So a lot is left unsaid, but it's still understood because of the shared context.
Exactly. And the listener argues that AI, because it relies on explicit instructions and data, is pushing society towards more low-context model of communication.
Meaning, we have to explain everything to AI in a very clear, detailed way so it doesn't get things wrong.
Right. And the listener worries that all this explaining, wading through all the AI slop, as they put it, will become increasingly time-consuming and tedious, potentially leading people to just opt for these superficial bullet points as a way to communicate more efficiently. Which, kind of ironic, right? The technology meant to make information more accessible might actually lead to a less nuanced, less thoughtful form of communication. How do you think this shift towards low context communication might affect other aspects of our lives?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if we'll become less adept at understanding subtlety or reading between the lines or engaging with more abstract or metaphorical language. Like, will we lose that ability to fill in the gaps ourselves?
That's a really interesting question. And the listener even points out that even traditionally high context concepts like spiritual or mystical ideas will likely need to be exhaustively explained so AI doesn't completely misinterpret them.
So even ideas that have always relied on a shared understanding, on a kind of unspoken agreement, might have to be spelled out in excruciating detail for AI to even begin to grasp them. That's a pretty big shift in how we interact with language and with each other.
It is, and I think it raises a lot of questions about the future of communication in a world increasingly mediated by AI.
So to wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways that stand out to you?
Well, I think the biggest one is this huge difference between the AI's superficial understanding and the depth and nuance of the listener's original writing. The AI, it missed irony, it made things up, it flattened complex ideas into generic summaries. It just goes to show the limitations of current AI when it comes to truly understanding context and meaning.
Definitely. We've seen how AI can create summaries that are factually incorrect and that lack crucial context. We've also explored some pretty big, profound concerns about where AI is headed, concerns that people have been voicing for over a decade. And we've looked at how AI might be subtly changing how we communicate, even how we think. You, our listener, by engaging with this original material and with our discussion, you've gained a much deeper understanding than any AI summary could ever give you.
Exactly. It highlights the importance of not just passively consuming information, especially when that information is processed by AI. You need to actively engage, to think critically, to question what you're being told.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to consider. In a world where AI can so easily generate information, and as we've seen, sometimes misinformation, how do we make sure we're not just skimming the surface? How do we cultivate that ability to discern truth, to seek out understanding that goes beyond the easy answers and the bullet points? In a world increasingly shaped by AI, how do we remain deep thinkers? That's something I hope you'll continue to think about.